This is a continuation of Monday morning, May 23rd, and I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about some of the interesting people I've had the opportunity to meet as a result of the work that I've done and the various things I've been involved in. So I'll start at the beginning and say that when I was going to De La Salle and when I was involved with the Young Democrat Farm Labor Party, I did get a chance to meet Hubert Humphrey, who was a senator at the time. And Hubert obviously became vice president and ran for president. And I also met Hubert walking down the street, Lyle Boulevard in McKeesport, when he was campaigning for president. He was somebody whose office was very good to me, and I had written to him a couple of times about employment in Washington, and he responded very graciously. So I do have a letter from Hubert somewhere in my files, but I think he would have made a great president, and certainly someone that I would have preferred, and I think the country would have preferred, to Richard Nixon. Another person that I met in those years was Harry Davis. Harry Davis was involved with a lot of the black or African American social service agencies. He was president of the NAACP, and he was very gracious, and he was friends with the Barksdales. So I got to know Harry pretty well as time went by. And then when I was working at the Model City Communications Center, we asked Harry to introduce Saul Alinsky, and I had the opportunity to meet Saul Alinsky, and I believe, if my memory is correct, I think we had lunch or dinner with him. I remember us sitting around a table, and remember that he had quite an interesting sense of humor. But I have a videotape that we made that was the last piece of video, I think, that was shot before he died unexpectedly of a heart attack in California in 1972. Another interesting national figure that I met during my Vista years was Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory had come to Pittsburgh to speak, and a group of us who were trying to organize mothers to save the child care centers in the McKeesport area had arranged a meeting with Gregory to see if we could get him to come and speak at one of our meetings. Unfortunately, he begged off, saying he had other commitments and wasn't able to do that, but I did have a chance to meet him and talk to him, and he's still alive today, I believe. Over the years, in Minneapolis, and in Pittsburgh, I met a number of people who were prominent in the sports world. One of those was Bill Brown, who was the fullback for the Minnesota Vikings and used to come down to the downtown YMCA where I played basketball frequently. So I got a chance to play ball with Bill Brown, who was really a tough guy. He was probably only 5'10" or 5'11", but he was a bear under the boards, and he was really so strong. It was difficult to get any rebounds away when he was trying to get a rebound. Also played with Gene Washington, who was a wide receiver for the Vikings, and who had played wide receiver for Michigan State, and I think he was maybe all Big Ten, maybe all American. He was one of the first draft choices, along with Clint Jones, that the Vikings drafted in that year, and he had a pretty successful year. Nice guy. But somebody else that I met, actually through a friend at a downtown bar called King Solomon's Mines, was Rod Carew. And Rod went on to have an outstanding Hall of Fame career with the Minnesota Twins. And Rod was good enough to invite us out to the stadium, and David had an opportunity to meet him and get an autographed baseball from him and an autographed postcard. I think I still have the postcard, although I don't have the baseball anymore. But we did take a couple pictures with him in the dugout. Great guy and a very principled and ethical guy. Very respected in Minnesota for his work with handicapped kids. One of the people that I worked with in Pittsburgh was had a sporting goods store, sportswear mostly, and his name was Kenny Durrett, and Kenny had played for, I think, Duquesne, and had a brief pro career, maybe 4 or 5 years, but he had some knee injuries that made it difficult for him to continue in the NBA. But he invited me in one day and invited me into the back room of his shop, and there I met Connie Hawkins, one of the best basketball players that ever played in the NBA. He was from New York City, and he had played, I think, at the University of Iowa, and had been wrongly accused in a scandal, so he ended up suing the NBA, and he played in the ABA for a number of years and set some records, but seemed like a really nice guy, and I wish I'd had the chance to play with him. Finally, football players. I met Paul Krause. He was a guest speaker at the Arena Football League annual dinner, the Iowa Barnstormers in Des Moines. And at the same time, Rita and I had the opportunity to sit at the table with and have dinner with the Iowa Barnstormers quarterback, who went on to a remarkable Hall of Fame pro career, Kurt Warner. Who else along the way? I played basketball, and when I was in Kalamazoo, even though my hips were in bad shape at the time, I had the opportunity through a friend to get in a pickup basketball game with Tommy the Hitman Hearns, who was one of the most famous boxers of his era, fought some great fights with Sugar Ray Leonard and with Marvin Hagler. Speaking of boxing, I think I remember seeing him. I don't remember being friends with him or talking to him, but he lived across the street and up the block. George Foreman was married to a friend of Twyla's, Adrian Calhoun, and I'm quite sure I met George at a nightclub a couple times. He didn't seem like a very friendly guy at the time, but that was maybe George in his early years. I met and had dinner with Imogene Coca, who was a co-star with Sid Caesar in a very popular television program. She and her husband, King Donovan, who is a well-known character actor, had been guests of Tony, my girlfriend Gail Wilson's father, Tony Gomes, and he invited them over for dinner along with later Richard Deacon, who had been a co-star in the Dick Van Dyke Show. And so I had a chance to meet all of them, very interesting people, and also my friend that I had hung around with quite a bit was dating Lonnie Anderson, and Lonnie was an actress in one of the plays at the Friars Dinner Theater, and so I did meet Lonnie Anderson. I believe I kissed her on the cheek. I don't remember much of a conversation with her other than she was headed off to Chicago to appear in another play there. But there were a number of interesting political figures along the line. One of the best mayors I had the opportunity to work with was Richard Caligiuri, who is the mayor of Pittsburgh, and who died prematurely of a disease called amyloidosis. when he was, I think, 59 years old, but a great leader for Pittsburgh, maybe the best mayor that Pittsburgh had in the 20th century. I also met Richard M. Daley, the younger, the son of Richard J. Daley, the legendary mayor of Chicago. And I think I met the older Mayor Daley. I remember being in his chamber as a result of the Model City Conference, but I don't remember having a conversation with him. I was, however, on stage a couple times with Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York, to hand out awards for the business improvement districts in New York City. And over the years, I think I met mayors of many of the big cities, including Los Angeles, including Seattle, including Miami, including any number of other cities, San Antonio. It was a frequent experience when I was working with these local organizations to get an opportunity to meet the mayor, president of the city council, and other local officials, and also met a number of governors along the way, including Paris Glendening, who was the mayor of, the governor of Maryland for quite a while and was well respected. I think he actually gave thought to and maybe tried running for president. The board of directors of Detroit Renaissance had a number of interesting members, and I met the CEOs of General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, and the biggest banks and the utilities, but also the owners of the Detroit Tigers and Detroit Red Wings. And I met Roger Penske, who was famous for not only for his nationwide trucking firm with big yellow trucks all over the country, but also because he was very big into automobile racing and had a lot of interest in the automobile business. He was actually considering buying the Saturn division of General Motors, but they couldn't work out a deal on that. So over the years, I have to say that the work that I've done has brought me into contact with quite a number of interesting people and people who have contributed quite a bit to their communities in a lot of ways. I believe, because just recently Prince died, I don't believe I ever met Prince, although it's possible I had played basketball with him at Phelps Field on 38th and Park. He is reputed to have played there on many occasions, and I remember some smaller kids, teenagers, coming and trying to get in games with us, those of us who were older and played there frequently. So very possible that I did meet Prince and I just didn't know it at the time. But other than that, I think that pretty well concludes the name-dropping part of this chapter. So I think I could probably write an article, if not a book, about some of the people I've met over the years. And once again, just the work that you do, the community development work, oftentimes brings you into contact with people who are very interesting and famous in their own way. And so I will conclude here, and we'll post this, and then I will be posting a concluding chapter later on.